meet all of you. As David said, my standard reply to when people ask me where I come from is, how much time do you have? Because normally I like to explain, I'm a byproduct of international education. So my parents were both doctors working for the World Health Organization, and we lived in many different countries. And subsequently, my professional life, I basically worked in 6 different continents, in 18 different countries where I actually lived. I am Belgian. I was born in Brazil. My parents are Italian, French, and the other side they're Dutch. The Portuguese name, these are the Jews that were expelled from Portugal 500 years ago. And so I'm here now trying to recover my land, but not being very successful in that. So most likely I'll be returning to Belgium soon. But fundamentally, I am the byproduct of international education. And from a professional standpoint, I am quite schizophrenic, but it's all right, because if you are schizophrenic and happy, that's not a problem. The problem is when you are schizophrenic and very angry. And so my background is in philosophy first, where I went to a university where people don't wear Peter Pan outfits. I went to Cambridge, and subsequently I studied chemical engineering. Of course, this is what you study after philosophy. And my PhD is in food biochemistry. And then I did a business degree later on in life. So it's a very, very complex background from an academic point of view. But actually, that gave me the opportunity to explore a number of different things in my career. And what I'm doing now is fundamentally working in education, because I am an executive professor in 2 business schools in Europe, one in Switzerland, one in Belgium, and also one in Brazil. And at the same time, I started 2 startup companies, one in technology and the other one in wine here in Portugal. And apart from that, I sit on the board of different companies, et cetera, et cetera. I was very honored to be the chairman of the board of ISB in Brussels for about 6 years, 6, 7 years. I have been associated with ISB for 30 years now, because I have 4 children and they all went through ISB. And I myself am a byproduct of international education. So when I start thinking about how to face crisis and how to look at this incredible environment we're all going through at the moment, and this environment is called the planet, more than anything else in the past, we are confronted with something of global dimension. The most important thing that comes to mind is our ability to cope with change, and our ability to cope with changes that are not expected. Because a school, by definition, deals with change. When I enter school in a kindergarten, or I put one of my children in 1st grade, and what I get at the end of a few years is a completely different human being. And so dealing with change is very much part of the DNA of schools. However, unexpected changes are the ones that make life a bit difficult for us. And when we start looking at change, we have to try to figure out how we can remain successful, competitive, attractive in the face of so much change around us. And what I thought I would do is just share with you a few of these ideas that might be useful to consider when you look, particularly because you are not only the head of admissions of different schools, but as I always told David, you are what I call the directors of first impressions. So when people come to school, this is the first face they see. And trying to attract, trying to bring people in and try to show what you can offer, which is different, which is special, is part of the challenge. So if you allow me, I would like to just share with you a few of these slides that I put together. There are only a few of them, so don't worry about it. And basically, it's about a theme which is very dear to all of us. We all want to be relevant and we all want to be different. However, in terms of education, very much like it happens in any industry, in any sector of life, you have three types of people that actually interface with your business. One is the user, the people who actually going to use your product or your service or your ideas, the buyer, and the ones who influence that. Think about the company marketing baby nappies or diapers, whatever you call it. There is a user, of course, that's the baby. The buyer is the parent, and the ones who influence it, the nurse at the hospital or the doctor, or the pediatrician or whatever. And they're all interfacing with that product, and they have a completely different perspective on the product itself. It's not different when it comes to education. Classically, when you're dealing with education, and we had some challenges, we always needed some information, we performed some analysis, we get into execution, we put into practice some of those elements, and if successful, we proceed to adoption of those new ideas or new approaches to solving some of the problems. When you're confronted with a crisis or confronted with this major situation that we have now, we shift this completely. So what we really need is imagination, because when it comes to challenging problems, imagination tends to be much more important than information only. If I'm in a sinking ship and I have to go to a desert island with one person, and that I have two choices, a person who has a lot of imagination and a person who has a lot of information, I'll take the person with imagination without thinking, because they'll be more likely that we'll survive. So imagination is very critical in these types of environments. Adaptation, because our adaptability will determine our ability to use that imagination and apply it. We have to keep focus on what we stand for, and only then bring the solutions that we have, these novel solutions, to be incorporated into the mainstream or the core of what we do. Therefore, we are really looking at two things. One is relevance, the other one is differentiation. How relevant can we be to the buyer, to the user, to the influencer? How different can we be? And not only that, nowadays, there is a third element to that, and this is resonance. So you need to be relevant, you need to be different, and you need to resonate with those three groups. And how can we go about this? Is understanding what we are, understanding how important this is. Because if something is relevant, but it's not different, it's a commodity. It may be extremely relevant, but not different. Therefore, it's just a commodity. If something is different, but not relevant, it's a curiosity. It should be in the zoo somewhere. These are actual pictures that I took of products, which are very different, but totally irrelevant. And the reality is that we need to find relevance and differentiation. Why is that? Because in schools, when we think about what schools were years ago, when I was a kid growing up in a foreign country, the school that was there, the international school that we found, was fundamentally a school replacing my old school back home. It was remedial. I needed something, go somewhere where I could go and get education because I couldn't fit into the local one. Then gradually we started moving to bringing a local perspective. So those schools started incorporating some local perspective and evolved into becoming more global schools with global students. It was no longer just so weird for students to come from different countries, and the movement of people all over the world began to increase. Nowadays, where we are is the staging of experiences. It's the local school for international students and the international school for local students. And this leads to an enormous level of customization. Every person who walks through your office is expected to have, they expect to have almost like a customized education, a customized addressing of their issues or their problems. And now, if you move in the other direction, you basically are looking at a commoditization of education, which still exists. Now, what makes it possible for a school to be competitive is to be different, to be relevant to the needs of the solving the problems of those three levels of buyers, users, and influencers, is to be absolutely relevant, and that will command the premium price. Now, this does not occur without emotional identity and credibility. In other words, there must be a connection that is emotional, very much like you have a connection with certain ideas or a brand if you are in marketing or whatever, and the credibility of the school that comes with results, that comes with a number of other elements that are normally talked about. And this is the elements of resonance that you have. So the food for thought I'd like to leave you with is to think in terms of how relevant can we be? How different can we be? How can we resonate with those three groups that are there? And who are those three groups? The users, the buyers, the influencers. How can we connect those elements? Always remembering that the best way to approach this kind of problem is to reverse, to do a sort of a counterintuitive questioning in terms of, instead of asking, what is my problem? How can I fix it? Why did I do this? Start it the other way. Why do we have an issue now? How can we address that? And what is the solution? Because by doing so, we'll be able to find the best links between these elements. So this is what I would like to propose as food for thought, fundamentally because I believe that the actual element of crisis is not going to go away very soon. It gives us huge opportunities to learn new ways of addressing the needs and the problems that affect those three groups. And we should not underestimate any of them. I mean, each one of those three groups has a significant impact in the way that a school is perceived, accepted, and in inverted commas, consumed as a product or a service. That's what I had, and I'd love to debate this with you if you think that's a good idea.